Hello everyone and welcome back. So today I'm joined by Louise Ann Wilson, who is here today to tell us about a project that she's been working on and also something very special in our collection. So Louise, would you like to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so hi Melissa. So I'm an artist and a researcher, and I make walking performance work and installations, often in rural landscapes. The work that I make invariably looks at challenging or difficult life events. And I'm particularly interested in life events that we don't really have a way of marking. And I'm interested then in making work often in a rural landscape, often that involves walking, and often involves people who themselves are experiencing a difficult life event. And the work creates walks and artworks that other people then can engage with. So the project I'm working on at the moment, it's called Women's Walks to Remember with Memory I Was There. And it's a project which has got different components, but it was inspired very much by Dorothy Wordsworth Rydal Journals were my key inspiration, as well as a chap I met in a care home a couple of years ago when I was making walking performance work down in Cornwall, and he was called Harold Potter. A couple of years ago I was walking down in Cornwall and I made a walk along the coast from Poldhu Cove to Mullion Cove, and the walk looked at the loss of landscape due to changing sea levels and also climate change, but it also looked at loss that people experience in their lives. The walk began at a care home, the Poldhu care home. One of the people I met whilst I was there was a chap called Harold Potter, and Harold said to me, when I kicked the bucket I want my ashes scattered at Mardale Head. And I said, well Harold, that's near where I live, that's up in Cumbria. So Harold then told me in intricate detail the one of his absolute favourite routes from the top of Haweswater up the Nambiel Pass through Mardale Head, and he described it absolutely intricately, and I made notes about it. And then I asked if he would mind if I would rewalk his walk for him when I returned home, and he said absolutely not, that was fine, he would be very happy for me to do that. So I, a month or so later, set off and followed his notes, and which were absolutely precise. He remembered it vividly, yeah. And I followed his route up to the Nambiel Pass, and subsequently I have rewalked quite a number of his walks, because what I then did was I sent photographs and maps back to Harold, and at the care home they shared these things with him, and actually it meant that they were able to have conversations with him that they'd not really had before. Yeah. And I think they saw they saw parts of Harold that they'd not really known to that point. So he was one key inspiration for the project, because I began to see that actually there was something quite powerful in rewalking walks that people could no longer do. So I decided then to think about making a project that would do that, and then through my interest in Dorothy's Rydal Journals, I decided to focus the walk on women's walks to remember. I'm very interested in the reasons that Dorothy Wordsworth walked as a young woman, and we know around 1800, when she was living here at Dove Cottage, that she was an incredible walker, a radical walker. And I'd become really interested in how she walked, not only creatively, by herself or with William or with friends, but I was really interested in how she walked in a way that I think, and I think it's one would understood to be quite therapeutic. And then reading her Rydal Journals was then interested in, at that point when she could no longer walk, but how she brought the landscape and the memories of landscape into her bedroom. And I'm interested therefore in the parallel between her physical walking, which I think we can consider to be quite therapeutic, and then her remembering of her walking whilst at Rydal Mount, which I think we can also consider to be therapeutic.
Yeah.
So her remembering the landscape, the walks, the nature, the sounds that she saw, which she remembered so vividly. You know, her powers of description in the Rydal journals are particularly when she's talking about landscape, nature and place, are just as incredible, just as powerful, just as vivid and detailed and descriptive as they are in her Grasmere journals.
Yeah.
So with those two key inspirations, the project that I've since developed has two key components to it. It's called Women's Walks to Remember With Memory I Was There. The With Memory I Was There part of that title refers to a line in Dorothy's poem Thoughts on My Sick Bed. We know from the journals that she suddenly became ill, and it meant that she became sort of housebound and then at times bedroom bound. We know from her journals, don't we, that sometimes she wasn't able to get out of the bedroom for maybe 5 weeks at a time. So she did two things. She brought the outside into her room. So she often talks about I think Pamela Woolf refers to them as treasures.
Yeah.
And she brings treasures into her room, which can be flowers or paintings, objects. So it's as if she's wanting to bring the landscape, bring nature back in. She has a robin as a singing companion for a long period of time. So she brings treasures in. And she also uses her memory to take herself back out. So in her journal she talks about, or she has a line which says, "No need of motion or of strength or even the breathing air. I thought of nature's loveliest scenes and with memory I was there." So she's able, isn't she, to release herself from the confines of this room, the prison that she would then describe it as, and she was able to release herself through remembering. So I think she was both bringing the landscape in and taking herself back out. So all that thinking about Dorothy in this room has led to one component of this project, which is an installation called Dorothy's Room, which is at the moment in her room at Rydal Mount, and next week is coming down here.
Yes,
to the
it is.
Wordsworth Trust.
Yeah.
So that's one component, which I can tell you a bit more about in a minute. And the other component of the project is that I've over the last few months I've had a call out for to women who have significant Lake District walks that they can no longer walk. And I've had some wonderful responses from a number of women who have shared walks with me. And I'm continuing to rewalk their walks at present. And the idea of that component is that present day walks that that people have been telling me about, eventually they will combine with all of the walks that Dorothy does mention in her Rydal journals to make a sort of a web, a weave of walks across the Lake District, which are women's walks to remember. So those are the two components of the project at the moment. So there's Dorothy's Room installation and there's the rewalking present day walks.
As you've said, Louise, one of your main inspirations for this project is Dorothy Wordsworth's Rydal journals. The particular journals that we have here were written between 1830 to 1835, and this was a time in Dorothy's life, as you've mentioned, where she was unwell and she was often bedbound. So these journals kind of really capture that time in Dorothy's life and show a different side to someone who, for most of her life, had spent so much time outdoors and so much time walking. So I know that you came to the Jones Centre and you looked at the journals and did a bit of research. So we've got one of the journals here in front of us. So I wonder, Louise, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about what you found when you looked at them.
Yeah, so this particular journal, which was written between 1831 and 1833. As with so much of her journal, I was really interested in how she was using it as a way of remembering landscape. And I took a photograph of this particular journal, open as it is at the moment. And when later I came to be designing the installation in Dorothy's room, I decided to set it around a bed, around her sick bed. I just used objects that were in the room, and when designing it, I decided I felt that it would be interesting to stitch some of her journal words into the bed linen, nearly as if she was kind of writing herself into bed, and this sort of idea of sort of somebody who couldn't get out of bed and was sort of, you know, we do know she wrote we know she wrote in her chair. There's writings of that, but I'm sure she wrote in bed. Well, she did write in bed. In trying to decipher it, I began to see that what I was looking at was her writing of the working out the poem, the Writing on My Sick Bed poem.
Yeah.
So it looks like she was writing across the page, and there's lots of crossings out, and you can really see her trying to work this poem out, trying to find the right words, and trying to describe this experience of being trapped in this room. She didn't write a huge amount of poems, so it's quite unusual to see her working on a poem anyway. And trying to using poetry to describe this experience, and then we have these more sort of everyday journalings that run alongside of them. So I couldn't believe it. I was really rather overexcited when I found out that this was the pages I'd chosen, and so what I then did was again took other copies, took very careful photographs, and I transcribed these words onto 2 pillows, and then some wonderful stitchers from Lancaster Priory have hand stitched the words into the pillows. There are other elements of the bed. There's a blanket that lays across the bottom of the bed, which was stitched by somebody who lives up on the Solway Firth, and that's one of Dorothy's lists, household list. It's actually one she wrote in Harrogate, and it's the household list one she wrote in Halifax. Yeah. And then another of the Lancaster stitchers, she stitched other pages of the journal, which I think we'll look at in a moment, which are the final pages of Dorothy's final journal. Yeah. So we can see in this journal here that she's working out the poem. So this top part, she's writing, "A prisoner in this lonely room, no bondage do I feel," and then I think it says prisoner again, and then she says, "No prisoner am I," something we can't quite work out, "I hold," and then she talks about healing nature's gifts are mine, and then the next line is nature's best gifts are mine. And then in the second part here, there's lots of her crossings out. So she says, "I felt a power unfelt before," and then she talks not of this perishable frame, and then she comes back to thoughts, images of early youth. She returns to that, and then she said, "So vivid was your power," but she crosses that out, and then she says that, which she crosses out, and then she has this poor penitent frame, and then she goes, "So vivid was your power, imprisoned in this lonely room." So that's the thing that keeps coming back. So this is all this sort of trapped in the room, imprisoned in this room, and she's really sort of thinking about her body being, physically unable, getting older, the effects of the aging. So she's really dealing with that and facing that. And then here she says, "No need of motion or of strength or even the breathing air. I thought of nature's loveliest scenes," and she's still working out whether at this point she wants to say scenes or haunts, and she has a question mark, and with memory I was there. So, and I think that was the bit that when I got the magnifying glass out and I saw, I just sort of nearly fell off my perch, really. I couldn't believe it was there.
I'm not surprised. And also what's really lovely about this verse is that it's, well, there's a lot of crossings out and workings out going on. There's very little here, so it's almost like that came straight out, isn't it? She really knew what she wanted to say there. And I think the lines, I thought of nature's loveliest scenes, and with memory I was there, are some of the most moving lines in any of Dorothy's writing, in any poem, really. Yeah.
And I think that goes back to her, as we were saying before, just that she'd spent so much time outside, you know, as a younger woman, spent so much time that it was sort of in her body, and so she was able to think about it, and that could take her there and free her from the confines of this room.
So we've come to the pages that Louise was talking about earlier, which are quite sad and difficult to look at because they do really reflect Dorothy's state of mind at the time when she was writing them. And you can see just here, they are written in pencil.
I was drawn to, so this page and the next page over are the last 2 pages of the journal, and we know that this journal was written between 1834 and 1835. So it's likely that this was written in 1835. So I was really drawn to it because I think it really does show somebody who is at this point still needing and wanting to express herself. I don't really know what it means, but she says, "Free entrance finds the summer breeze, my eyes behold the leafy trees." So something still really poetic here. She's rhyming. And then she's here in this part, she's talking about the damp thick walls surrounding her, but her writing is, first of all, as you say, it's in pencil, which is unusual. So was she no longer able to cope with or handle a quill, which is what she would have written with, of course, previously to this? Was the ink just too much? And still here she's coming back to these damp thick walls, and sights and sounds, and something about warning sounds. So and the writing is getting lighter and lighter. It still does make sense. She still is making sense. There's this need for her to I think it's still about her being trapped in this room. I think that's what we seem to have here, and yet she's still able to kind of just see the trees, and around her window at Rydal Mount, we know that she had plants growing and plants growing on the outside of the house. So was she just lying in bed looking at those leaves blowing in the wind? Was she was still able to see and behold it and enjoy that? So these words and the ones which we'll look at in a moment on the next page are stitched into a bedsheet, and they just fall away, and the whole bed kind of falls away to one side, and I'm interested in how it's reflecting her sort of falling away, really, somehow, and yet not. She still is writing, that kind of the kind of power of writing, of remembering, of the landscape that she it still seems so important for her, and maybe that's part of what enabled her to hold on, to be freer than her physical environment allowed for.
Well, thank you so much, Louise, for spending this morning with us and with Dorothy's Rydal Journals and telling us all about your project, which is really, really wonderful. And having seen Dorothy's bed at Rydal Mount already, I'm really, really excited for it to come to the Wordsworth Museum, and I think it's a very special project, and one that really highlights a different time in Dorothy's life, and especially in comparison to the time that we are focusing on in our upcoming exhibition, This Girl Did, Dorothy Wordsworth and Women Mountaineers, which is all about celebrating Dorothy as a walker of mountains, and again, putting the two side by side, as they will be in the exhibition, I think creates a very, very powerful experience for anyone who wants to get to know Dorothy. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Now, if anyone is interested in getting involved in Louise's Women's Walks to Remember project, you can find Louise through the Wordsworth Trust, and we'd be very happy to put you in touch with her, because you are looking for more people to work with, aren't you?
So the project is now beginning to really gather some lovely walks. Those will be mapped alongside of Dorothy's walks. But if you do have a walk to remember, either a walk that that somebody might have themselves, or if they know somebody who was once a walker, and it can be any sort of walk. It can be a fell walk, it can be an everyday walk, it can be a walk to gather the sheep in off the fell. It can be a walk that was significant, a walk that might have marked a life event. The project will keep growing, and whilst it's here, both the installation and the walks that I've gathered so far, which will show in the exhibition upstairs. Whilst it's here, I will keep walking. I will keep adding to the walks. So it's not too late. If you've got a walk to remember, please, we'd love to hear about it.
We would, and the installation and exhibition itself will be on display in the museum from the 1st of September, so very, very soon at the point of filming, and we're really looking forward to having it. So thank you very much again, Louise.
Pleasure.
And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you again next time. Bye for now.
Thank you, bye.